district, and it's just as big an issue for the two people that I'm going to introduce, because they're the ones who are going to be carrying the ball first in committee and then, of course, on the floor. I'm going to thank our Veterans United for Statehood. Would you stand, please, for being with us? And the Statehood Senator Paul Strauss is also here. First, I want to thank our majority leader, Steny Hoyer. He, of course, is our longtime regional partner, but he is the majority leader whose skillful hands we will commit this bill when this hearing is done. And I do want to say of Steny that he's already done more than his part already. He took leadership on his own. I didn't ask him to do this. No problem for me. When he wrote an op-ed piece in the Washington Post, that sent a powerful message from the top leadership of the House of Representatives that this was going to happen. I also want to thank Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She had no sooner assumed her post as Speaker within the first day or two than she endorsed DC statehood. So we are very fortunate and very pleased to have our top leadership behind us, in front of us, making this happen. I also want to give my appreciation to my long-term friend Carolyn Maloney. That is who is going to carry the ball today. I'm going to be sitting beside her, but that's all I can do. She is going to carry it to the finish line in committee today until we get that vote. And I want to say that I was at her press conference also with Steny yesterday on the Women's History Museum, and she has shown that she can keep to something until it happens, because she's been with the Women's History Museum, I think, for as long as she's been in Congress. So I know that Carolyn, although a new chair, is more than ready for what she will face today, and she will face a lot. The Republicans are not going to let this happen easily. But she has already shown her skill and her poise as chair. Carolyn, is certainly the most challenging markup you've had until now. You haven't had many. It may be your most challenging markup for some time, because the Republicans are hell-bent on throwing up obstacles to passage. We're prepared for them. Carolyn is certainly prepared for them. Remember, they oppose taxation without representation, but not for DC. Carolyn has been preparing and will show them who's in charge, so we have every confidence in her. We've got 221 original co-sponsors. With that kind of co-sponsorship, that's before you get to the vote, either in the committee or on the floor. This bill is destined to pass. But after 219 years of unequal treatment in our own country, by our own country, DC residents are saying, we're just not going to take it anymore. That won't mean much without the leadership of the two leaders I'm about to introduce. First, I would like our chair, who will show in just a few minutes, Carolyn Maloney, to speak at this time.
Day for human rights, civil rights, and certainly for the District of Columbia. Today, the Oversight Committee will have a meeting, a business meeting, to consider the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act. This will be the first markup of a DC statehood bill in Congress since 1993. I would like to thank Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton for her compelling, sustained advocacy on behalf of the people she represents in the District of Columbia. I would also like to thank Majority Leader Hoyer for his commitment to have this bill on the floor. Currently, more than 700,000 Americans living in the District of Columbia are taxed with no voting representation in Congress. Our founding fathers fought for their liberty on the basis of no taxation without representation. So we need to change this for the District of Columbia. The residents there pay more in federal taxes than 22 states and more in taxes per capita than any state. And in fact, there are 2 states in our country, in our Congress, that have less population than the District of Columbia. The residents of the District of Columbia have been petitioning for congressional voting rights and local self-government in excess of 200 years, and yet neither chamber of Congress passed a statehood bill yet. I am optimistic that this is about to change. In 2016, 86% of DC residents voted for statehood. I echo their support and joined 223 of my colleagues in support of the Washington, D.C. Admissions Act. I want to close again commending Congresswoman Norton for her tireless work to extend voting rights to residents of the district. She has demonstrated continued leadership and has worked valiantly for the people and the residents of her district. Thank you so much. And now our esteemed Majority Leader, Steny Hoyer.
Thank you very much, Chair Maloney. And Eleanor Holmes Norton, Congresswoman Norton, thank you very much for your leadership, your tenacity, and your focus, and your impetus to this particular piece of legislation. I have long been a supporter of and urging that the District of Columbia represented had a real vote in the Congress of the United States. Now, when I was Majority Leader the first time, we assured that the representative of the District of Columbia and other non-voting members of the Congress of the United States would have a vote in what we call our Committee of the Whole. Under the Constitution, however, we could not extend that fully. Unfortunately, when the Republicans took back the majority, they eliminated that vote. An act of disrespect, not only towards the residents of the District of Columbia, but towards our democracy. What is the premise of a democracy? The premise of a democracy is that the people make the decisions. And they make those decisions by voting. By sending representatives to the United States Senate and to the House of Representatives to represent their point of view. But if you cannot vote, you cannot represent. Now, having said that, Eleanor Holmes Norton does an extraordinary job representing the District of Columbia and its residents. She is a very senior member of the Congress, a very influential member of the Congress, and a very strong voice for the residents of the District of Columbia and democracy generally. I was chair of the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe for over a decade. We looked at democracy in Europe and in the signatory states, about how that Helsinki Final Act was being carried out in terms of giving people the voice. And I've looked more broadly than that. I cannot find a capital city in any free world, free country in the world, not one, except the District of Columbia, whose residents do not have a voting member of their parliament. Think of that. The beacon of democracy has a capital in which 700,000 people do not have a vote in the Parliament, the Congress of the United States, of its country. 2 states, Wyoming in particular, has 40% less residents than Washington, D.C. Surely our founding fathers, when they said we'll set aside a territory, and by the way, Maryland gave its part of its state, and Virginia gave part of its state, Virginia took their part back. Just saying. To set up the capital. Surely the founders didn't think by doing so they would disenfranchise anybody who moved to that capital and lived in that capital. Surely they did not. And surely we should not either. Now, I have long advocated, as I said, but I have come to the conclusion that the only way to give the residents of the District of Columbia what every other citizen of America has: a voting representative in the Congress or in the Parliament of the country. So I am a strong supporter and congratulate Chair Maloney and the 220, I have 223 co-sponsors, 221, 223. We had 224. One became a Republican and came off the bill. Do Republicans not believe that 700,000 of their fellow citizens ought to have a vote represented in the Congress of the United States? You'll have to ask them that question. But when this bill comes out of committee, I have pledged to Ms. Norton and to the mayor, Mayor Bowser, and to Chair Maloney, that this bill will come to the floor. It is in the Democratic platform of our party, but much more importantly than that, it is the constitutional right of a citizen of America to have a vote. And just because they move to their nation's capital, that vote should not be taken away from them. So I'm very pleased to join Chair Maloney, one of the great leaders of the country for so many decades in so many different areas on behalf of civil rights and human rights, and in this case, voting rights for the citizens, American citizens, who ought to be fully franchised. That's what America's about. So we're going to bring it to the floor. Hopefully we're going to pass it to the House of Representatives, and I'm hopeful that Senator McConnell will put this bill on the floor and let the senators vote. Because just as surely as they ought to have voting representation in the House of Representatives, those 700,000 citizens, like Wyoming, like Vermont, who are smaller than the District of Columbia, have voting representatives in the Senate and in the House. This is a blot on our democracy. We ought to remove it. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for Peter before he goes?
Probably take one or two questions.
All for Chairwoman Maloney. Go ahead.
Chair Maloney, could I ask you a question about the Republican opposition you expect to hear today? Do you think that it will be long? Do you think that it will be drawn out? What are you expecting to hear from your colleagues in the minority?
Well, this is not an issue in my mind that's partisan. This is an issue about human rights, voting rights, civil rights. Whatever the opposition is, we will be speaking to the substance and the importance of this resolution that we are considering today. As was mentioned, they paid more taxes than 22 other states. There are 2 states that have far less population than the District of Columbia. And as the leader just pointed out, no capital in the world can we find where the people are not given voting rights in the place that they live. So whatever that comes, we're going to be ready for them, and we are arguing on the substance.
Why do you think it's so partisan?
Ask them.
I'm sorry, did someone
I do want to say that we do expect dilatory tactics, and Chairwoman is not going to tell you how she's going to respond, but not only is she prepared, the So this is not a hearing that is going to go the way you'd expect in a hearing to bring more democracy to go. The other point I want to make is that already 100 national organizations who have track records of getting legislation through the Senate are preparing to take this bill when we pass it in the House and move on the Senate so that we can send this bill where it should go to the President's desk.
I will add that we had a hearing earlier this year, and it was a long hearing, it was a substantive hearing. Not one single point that the opposition raised had any bearing, absolutely any merit to bearing.
All right, guys, that's probably all the time we have. We gotta get to a markup, so.